Hello, my name is Joel Martin. I'm research leader for HFS's applications research. Today I'm joined by Scott Surovich. Scott's joining us to really go into one of my passionate topics, managing the cloud, getting into Kubernetes, that whole exploration of what's next in modernization. So with that, I'm going to let Scott introduce himself, and we're going to carry on some really good conversation over the next 15 minutes, and we hope you enjoy it. Scott, introduce yourself, please.
Great, thanks, Jill. First of all, I appreciate you inviting me to this session. I love participating in these. So my name is Scott Surovich. I work for HSBC Bank. I am the product owner and the global engineering container lead. So I'm the product owner for Kubernetes on-prem, and right now we are primarily an Anthos on-prem organization. So my team deals with everything hybrid and internal Kubernetes with cloud. And Kubernetes is probably not the only thing as well, because it's just anything cloud that's going to go into hybrid. Obviously, Kubernetes being the big topic in today's world, and that's where we focus a lot of our efforts on, and the ecosystem. So as well as doing stuff at HSBC, I do write books in my spare time, or attempt to. I have a couple books on the market for Kubernetes called Kubernetes and Enterprise Guide. It's myself and my co-author, Mark Borstein, who is the CIO of, or CTO of Tremolo Security. And I'm also writing a book with Google on Anthos in action. Myself and a bunch of Google fellows and Googlers are writing that book to talk about all about Anthos, all the ancillary pieces, as well as GCP offerings, not just what they integrate with Anthos. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I tend to do a lot in cloud and Kubernetes space. It's just one of the big passions.
No, that's great, and I want to come back to that in a bit because I have a theory around how people are collaborating more to do all kinds of things. And I think your work both on the book as well as C and CF is some good learnings for other managers out there that are watching this. You like me, kind of a geek. We like to fiddle with things. I like to build stuff. I think you like 3D printing and all kinds of good stuff. But we don't do Kubernetes. We don't design things all the time because we just love them. We get paid to do them because they intersect with the business. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how your job intersects with the business as kind of a start off, because a lot of people are trying to draw those connections. Why does all this cool stuff in technology help my business grow, help me with customer transactions or drive efficiency? So where do you intersect and what's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a unique opportunity for people, especially coming from my background. So my background primarily has always been infrastructure. Operating systems, connectivity. So whether that happens to be Linux, Windows, proxy servers, Citrix, virtualization. So I come from that world, and in that heritage world, you often didn't know what the developers were doing. Most people didn't even care, right? It was I need a Linux server. Here's a Linux server. We never even spoke to them. They would just go in and deploy their application. So that worked in that world. To a certain level, you did have to know some of the application connectivities, but when you get into the cloud, especially Kubernetes world, you have to interact with developers a lot more. So you have conversations with them, which is actually one of the most fun things that I have had in my career in a very long time. So for the past 3-4 years, as HSBC has taken into cloud and on-prem cloud as well, it's gotten to the point where I have weekly calls with multiple global heads, and we talk with their developers. So we have to integrate with their developers so they can talk to the business to say, okay, this is why you want to do it. So we have to always get that solution of, it's not about cost, although everybody thinks that at the beginning, right? Everybody's like, is it cheaper or isn't it cheaper? Well, it could be a little bit more expensive potentially, but if it gives you that agility and the speed to market, you ultimately, of course, are going to gain more customers. You're going to gain, just more revenue on whatever you can get out there first, faster, or make it better. So dealing with the IT portions for the business, and at times the business themselves, trying to explain why they want to refactor their application, why might this, or why does it help them in the long run? Because it's going to take some time, right? Especially if you're going to go into a brownfield. If you're greenfielding something, well, either one takes time, to be honest. So you can brownfield applications to Kubernetes. There's still some effort, right? It's not just moving like a VM to a new infrastructure. But if you go into a greenfield, there's some more development. And we have that with many of our top tier applications. But talking to the developers, talking to the business, we know what they need. So we are not just Somebody used this analogy once with me. We're not just making an in-ground swimming pool with concrete and making people jump in, because in that case, you're stuck. You're being rigid. So Kubernetes allows you to give these developers a lot of control, but maintaining the overall ecosystem. So helping them keep it stable, resilient, upgrading it, all the add-on components and ecosystem. There's a lot to it. So dealing with the business, it's great with the interaction now. Again, people, and I've been here 20 years, people that have been here 20 years as well that I've never spoken to because we were in different parts of the world. Of course, as we know, as we go agile, we have to start bringing those in. And I think we've talked about this in the past, Joel, with silos and the old diagrams of workflows. It doesn't work anymore. Venn diagrams are the way to go, where you get overlap of people, and then you work in those little pods or those little breakout teams.
Right. No, I completely agree. That kind of brings, you brought up a couple of things that I'm really hearing from a lot of our customers these days is moving to the cloud, where it started off a technology discussion, really seeing it as an operational change or transformation in the business. Is that what you're seeing in the financial industry as well? Do you see this, going from servers to Citrix to virtual machines, now thinking in cloud first? That sounds like a technology roadmap, but it's really clear this is much more an evolution of how the company operates. It's business operations that we're finally engaged with. And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's probably leading to a lot more of these conversations that you just alluded to.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like I said, the abstraction history is what I call it. In a couple of the books, I just kind of always mention, you go from physical, you went to this, you went to that, and you keep abstracting layers. Well, that abstraction is what it empowers the developers, right? So if you do go to a cloud, you go to like GCP, and you need to do something like BigQuery. In the old days, of course, that would have taken how long to build out some kind of server infrastructure, whether it's virtual machines or not, because now you probably have graphic cards, some kind of offloading cards, and now you just kind of go to the cloud and select it. Of course, there's some downfalls to that as well. Sometimes you can go out to the cloud and you say, oh, this is great, we can enable ourselves. Let's click on Cloud SQL, spin up a database. But yet, no one's going to make your database for you. So you have to know how to do some kind of relational tables, have to know how to create some queries, inner join, outer join. So the problem I see sometimes with cloud is they make it too easy to deploy an infrastructure, but you may not know how to use it. It's like going to a car dealer and you buy a Standard today. You want a stick, but you don't know how to drive it. Well, that's great. You got the car, you know how to drive that way, but you don't know how to put it in first gear. So you got to watch that. And we've seen that come back and bite certain projects, just thinking, oh, we thought it'd be easy to just click this button. And it is, but then you got to go get a DBA potentially to help you out. But there's other great uses out in the cloud that are just no-brainers to me. I've always said this on a couple presentations with Google and others. Web-facing applications are perfect in a cloud, because I always like to stress, I've been on crisis calls where we're being attacked, denial of service attempts, something like that. You get your best people on the phone to start, scrubbing your data, putting it through Cloudflare, or doing whatever you do to mitigate this. Instead, you put it out in the cloud, let Google deal with it, let Amazon deal with it, let Microsoft deal with it, because they've got all the WAFs and everything else in the front that's going to help with that. And with any luck, you can keep your people, who are probably your most skilled people that get on these crisis calls, to actually keep going forward with engineering. So put the stuff you don't have to deal with, somewhere else that can hopefully help you, and work from there.
You said one word that's come up in the first 5 minutes quite a few times: people. The change in talent and what's going on there. I mean, tell me about how you're seeing technical talent having to change, how you're attracting and how you're basically keeping people in your company. Because again, when I talk to so many firms, it's about, yeah, I got Bob, I trained him up on Kubernetes and Bob left the next day. Or I'm trying to develop full stack folks because developing Ninja Kubernetes or container experts is not something I can sustain. So I'd rather work with somebody, a partner or outsourcers to do that. What are you experiencing in talent, and how are you, both attracting the right talent, or heck, just figuring out what kind of talent you need, and then bringing that up to your team?
Yeah, that's a great topic, right? It's probably one of the most common questions I get from people that might reach out on LinkedIn. And that's not just saying, hey, want a job or something like that. It's, hey, how do you guys do this? Because we all know the talent pool, it's out there, right? We know there's Kubernetes people, nowhere near enough to fill what we need. And that's us included.
Mhm.
So we've done both, to be honest. Also, we do have some trusted partners. We go to them and say, okay, you know what? I need to augment staff, whether it's for 6 months, whether it's for a year, whether it's whatever. Those are semi-beneficial. And the reason I say that is they might be Kubernetes gurus. They come into an organization though, whether it's HSBC, whether it's Citi, whether it's any of the big places, right? We've all got our own culture. We all have our own processes. It takes anywhere from 2 to 3 months probably to get somebody up to speed where they can actually go do some work. In a 6-month contract, that means you get 3 months of work. And what we have run into with some others is similar to what you're saying. These kind of people will get a lot of experience. They, depending where they go, you know, whether they come to HSBC, whether they go somewhere else, they've got a nice name on their resume potentially that says it's a big organization, and then they go somewhere else.
Right.
I've used the term a couple times, and whether it's good or bad, it's mercenaries to me right now, because in Kubernetes, like I said, you put a Kubernetes hat on, walk down the street in California, probably you'll get a ton of job offers just because they see the word Kubernetes. And they'll assume, of course, you're a geek. And hey,
Right.
this person might know what they're doing. Come in, interview. I'm a big fan of internal people. So what we have our culture here is pretty unique, that if you talk to people at the bank and say, how long have you been here? I've been here 20 years. Most of my engineering team on my Kubernetes side are anywhere from 15 to 25 years. So we stay because we like a lot of our counterparts. So if you build the right culture, you can get people to stay or potentially come in. To get in is a problem right now. So we, like a lot of banks, we're pretty secretive about what we do. So you're not going to see us open sourcing projects, getting on GitHub, showing you all the really cool stuff we might do internally. And there's lots of reasons for that, right? Just highly regulated. We've got to worry about a lot of security and even potential problems that could come up from us releasing certain things. But at the same time, how do you get people to say, that's a cool place, I might want to go work there?
Right.
So I really stress to people, it's great to get the word out on what you do within reason, right? There are certain times you can't. But in my case, I tend to do it all on my own, and then I let people figure out where I work. And then they might say, ooh, they're doing some cool stuff. And we do. We've got some pure scale that we do that a lot of people don't deal with. In Kubernetes internally, I'm pushing almost 1,000 nodes now. And by the end of the year, I'll probably quadruple that. And that's the kind of stuff you just don't hear about, because we're not going to go out and just announce that. It's not that it's a big secret, but it's the only way to get talent is to make people excited. And we've spoken about this in the past, Joel, as well, but IT is fun, or should be fun. Any of the people that are, I'm going to say, subject matter experts, top talent, people you want, there's a fine line between work and play. And those are the people you really want, right? I want to hire the geeks. I want the Joels. I want the other Scotts, because I want to say, I'd love my first interview question to be, do you have a lab at home? And if they say yes, ask them what.
Right.
Because you get those diehard geeks. I have server class machines. It's the only way I could learn, is to go out and do that. I mean, it's not to say that makes the person great, right? But you need people who will enjoy it, want to play, want to learn. And with any luck, they want to teach it to other people. So you can get that genius too that can interact with people. That's not good either. It might be. Those are the people you put in the back end and say, okay, great, they can design everything, but you may not want them talking to a business. So you got to strike the balance on the team. And in Kubernetes, that's a challenge right now. You know, when I interview people, I have about 10 questions. I think mostly people answer half of them, roughly. Nobody's ever answered them all. And that's okay, because I like to see when people don't know an answer. You know, how do they react? Do they get upset? Do they ask questions about the question? I've had people that interview go, I didn't know that, but can you give me some feedback? They write down everything and they say, I'm going to go read about this tonight. That's the person, even though they might not have done as well as I would like on the interview, I might hire that person.
Right.
Because you see the initiative.
That's great. So the second big question always comes up is, especially when you're talking about Kubernetes and cloud, it's all about consumption. How the hell do you budget for what you need? Because now we're in an environment where it is about consumption, and it's like, how much are you going to eat? That's how much Microsoft, Google, AWS will come out and charge you for. So how do you develop a budget? How do you work with the business when you have periods where that budget might need to be increased? And what kind of experiences have you had on the good side of that, as well as challenges that you faced, so that others can learn from your budgeting experience?
Yeah, that's another great question, right? And it's a question you've heard for 2 years, probably
Mm-hmm.
with this, especially 2 years ago. You would hear, hey, let's push everything to cloud. Big push all over the place. I mean, big companies out there. If you go and Google this, you'll see it. One of the big major game manufacturers ran into this, where they just said, hey, let's push everything to the cloud. Looked like a great idea on paper. Then the bills started coming in, and then they would look and go, oh, we need to put this back on prem, or at least partially, right? The right workload for the right location. Although they closed their data centers and got rid of most of the people, so you have
Mm-hmm.
nothing to come back to. So we can kind of take those in parts. If you go to cloud, there are always perfect use cases, like we said. So we have projects that we've moved to cloud that have saved 7 figures, but it's the right workload again. And we're big query people. I mean, show me most people that aren't, if you're going to do that kind of workload. So that alone can help us save money, because we're not building big clusters or big workloads of machines that run what? Maybe that workload runs once a month, or maybe even it's weekly, doesn't matter. If it's not daily, the on-prem could get more expensive. So you got to
Right.
always figure out the right cost. Now, what people don't realize in the cost calculators a lot is their egress traffic, the storage. It depends where it's communicating, right? So when people tend to put one thing out in the cloud and it's going to talk to potentially another cloud or some other system, you're paying for all that egress traffic. You just got to make sure you keep those in mind. And so budgeting, like a lot of places, we tend to just have projects in most of the CSPs, right? And if you want a project, you got to go through a big committee. So mainly for us, because of compliance, right? We got to go through and make sure we check all the boxes for the regulatory problems. The wrong workload gets out there without approval. That's what shuts companies down. And that's in the worst case. Your best case would be you're going to lose a ton of customers after a negative impact. So they always say for every one customer that's upset, you lose 10. So you start doing that if your banking system's down for 4 hours. There's certain people that are going to evaluate, better move this. So it's on-prem. It also depends on how you run your data centers. So project-based, we let them deal with the budget. So they go out there, they deal with it. They often might come back and say, okay, wait a minute, this is expensive. How do I streamline it? To the credit of most CSPs, they work with you pretty well on that, right? Google's got some great tools that'll tell you what you're wasting. They've got their cost analyzer and optimizer. I mean, all of them have something like that, right? I just happen to focus a lot more on GCP. And that helps. On-prem, it's a lot easier for us just simply because we have a run rate. We charge them for what they have. So it's not variable. That's set for the year. Of course, that might change next year, depending upon workload, cost. And if you go into cloud, you're going on, of course, the OpEx model versus the CapEx model. So that does require a whole new look from finance, potentially, and budgets in general. Now, of course, you do get into a realm on there where my eyes will gloss over because I'm a geek. I'm definitely not the person that tries to figure out the total finances, but it's definitely something we're learning on. We have tools that tell us what's going on. We have tools for optimization of workloads, because it's way too easy in the cloud to say, I have 2 containers. Let's spin up a Kubernetes cluster with 8 nodes. No one's going to stop you from doing that, but you're going to pay for those instances, and you don't always use it. And the one thing people think about in cloud is you always hear it's cheaper, but they assume you're going to turn things off, right? And I'm sure you've seen this with some customers. I mean, if you leave them running constantly, it's not as cheap, right? Because they're on. In an organization like us that's global, I don't think we can turn off many systems because there could be somebody using it from all parts of the globe at any one time. So that makes it a challenge. Unless you get into something like functions or serverless, right? That's going to help on the cloud.
You've kind of brought up two interesting things separately, but you've talked about how the business needs to understand technology more and how to work with the technology team. And then just now in the budgeting discussion, you've also talked about how technology leaders need to understand the finances of their operation and their role in that. And a more sophisticated and likely a more successful company not only partners around what they're going to build and deliver, but how they're going to fund it and what are the right tools. And so them understanding, again, that work with small A agile, come together to share the ideas, but, learn from each other, not only the technical talents and how to do things, spinning up a SQL server if you're a business analyst, but understanding how to communicate the costs and the upside and the challenges if you're on the technology side. So again, not losing your geekdom, and sure, I can spin up a lot of things and I show you how to fire up Kubernetes clusters, but here's the cost quotient that you need to be mindful of, so that the VP doesn't come knock on both of our foreheads in 2 weeks and go, "Great job, guys. How am I going to pay this $5 million bill?" So
Absolutely.
I think that's something that, again, going back to the evolution of companies and their operations, this is becoming more and more important. Is not only having your discrete skills, but understanding how to leverage and understand the other person's needs, but also how they're going to afford and plan for it for the long term. So that's really cool. Something you mentioned earlier when we talked a little bit about you, or when you talked about you, was your work with CNCF, you're writing books. I thought you were pretty much a full-time guy at HSBC. You must be burning the midnight oil to do these things. Why do you do this? Why do you take on this extra work that arguably, it's not your daily activity?
Yeah, people always say that when they're talking to me. Joel, they're always like, "How many hours in a day do you have?" And I'm gonna outright admit it. It can be a problem, right? Because you're gonna burn yourself out. I will often at night see it might be 11 at night, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I really hate IT. I'm done. I'm so tired of this field. And it's just because you get exhausted, right? You get a good night's sleep. I wake up in the morning, you're ready to go. But after you've done long days, so I've always told that to people, and they say, "Hey Scott, how are you today?" I go, "I'm tired." I go, "But wait, it's my own fault," and it's because I enjoy this so much that it just becomes, I hate to say an addiction, but it is, and it's always changing, right? The one thing I tell people about my role in 20 years here, the reason I'm having so much fun is I learn something new every day, sometimes multiple things a day. You just never know what kind of question you're going to get. So I also then take those kind of things and say, well, you know what, other people might like these. And that's where the book came about first. The first book that we decided to write when we were approached by Packet to write it, Mark and I sat down, and we bring two unique experiences, because again, I come from infrastructure. I used to be a coder way back, but Mark is a coder, right? So he gets into this side, he deals with the government. So we bring unique perspectives to it, and that made writing the book fun, because I might write a chapter, Mark looks at it, he says, "Yeah, what about this angle?" And I think about that. Or I wrote something, or he wrote a chapter. So it's fun. And what's great from those kind of things is you form new friendships too. So Mark's in DC, I'm in Buffalo. We talk a couple times a week about everything, whether it's 3D printing, whether it's Kubernetes, whether it's the next book. It's great for that. And the same with the CNCF work, working with the Financial Services Working Group. So we're trying to talk with other banks, fairly secretively, about best scenarios, best use cases for certain things. Now, never proprietary. It's more like, hey, you should have an OPA policy for this in Kubernetes, or have you thought about this policy, or have you thought about runtime security? I guess very similar to the documents put out recently by the government on Kubernetes, right? They're pretty high level, but it's how you should do things. And one thing that I've always been a big fan of is multi-tenant Kubernetes clusters. Most people weren't, say 3 years ago, but we offer our service as what's called namespace as a service. So you're going to share the cluster, but you get all this access. So I saw that wasn't understood a lot in the field. And I was a trainer for many years with Microsoft. Citrix, Novell goes way back. I enjoy teaching. So because of that, again, the books, just to keep writing about them. So it paid off well, right? I love it because the people in the community that reach out to me on LinkedIn to talk about things, they might have a problem passing the CKA. So they've reached out to me and I say, hey, I hate to say it on too many calls, but I'm happy to get on a Zoom call with somebody when I have time and talk about a topic. It's going to help them pass the exam, for an example. But at the same time, I'm going to learn something in there because they're going to ask a question and I just like learning. So there could be a problem there. I don't know when to stop. That is part of the problem, right? I'll just keep piling on the work just because I never know how long this ride's going to go. Because Kubernetes is getting great people out there. There's a lot of great people out there. But eventually, as any technology matures, you get a bigger and bigger pool of people and less people who probably have all those questions. There's still going to be some questions, right? If you keep honing your skills, learning all the new stuff. But it's not like now, where there's a lot of new people jumping in. So timing was good, in my opinion. I always tell everybody, good timing. I started Kubernetes when very few people were really considering it, not even the bank. That was just me saying, this looks cool. This might be the next big thing. I like virtualization. And fortunately for me, I tell everybody it worked out that way because I spent many, many, many hours trying to build my first cluster, going way back.
So that's bringing me to the last two questions. First one being, reflecting back on that. I mean, Kubernetes, it's still a fairly new technology. People are really dealing with it. There's different flavors for different clouds. If I'm a IT leader and I'm tasked with looking at my company's cloud strategy, and I'm really interested in microservices, containers, and Kubernetes, what's the most important piece of advice you would give somebody like me?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, aside from the right people, but we were kind of talking about that, right? How are you going to know if you have the right people? In our case, we were very lucky with that. We just had people always playing with it before it became that technology. But Kubernetes is difficult, right? We all know that. And I've said this more than once in a lot of other presentations that statement of Kubernetes is too hard. Okay, we don't hear it quite as much, but 2 years ago, you heard it a lot. And I used to joke with people and I said, I don't understand when IT became the field where things were difficult and we said, it's too hard. That's just not what you do in IT. But we got so used to those years after, say, virtualization came out to now. Sure, there was OpenStack in there, right? And it had its adoptions, but it didn't do like what Kubernetes has done. So it is going to be difficult, right? Especially if you're just starting out. It may not be difficult to prop up a cluster, for an example, because that's fairly easy now with all the tools, whether you're using, OpenShift, whether you're going to use Rancher, whether you're going to use Anthos. But if it breaks, what happens? So don't ever be content that you think, oh, I can deploy clusters. You have to understand the objects. There's a lot in there. I think base Kubernetes now has 62 resources built in. If you don't know what a stateful set is, if you don't know what why you would do a deployment or why you would not make a replica set instead of a deployment, why you would do PVCs or how they work, storage classes. There's just, give your people time and try not to bog them down into, I got a cluster and now you're going to turn your engineers into level one almost, because who else can handle those phone calls? I get a lot of escalations right now because we're training people. And that takes away from the cutting edge designs of what should we do next. And I know I keep focusing on Kubernetes because, of course, that's just one of my big passions. But it's the same with using a cloud. And I know all the cloud providers love to push, enable your developers. They don't have to worry about infrastructure. Now, technically on-prem, they don't have to either, right? They come to us as the DC team or IT operations, and we do what the cloud providers do. Mm-hmm. And at least on-prem, when they want a database, they know they have to talk to a DBA, and they'll help out. Whereas on the cloud, they don't have that. So just know the limitations of what support you get or don't get when you go to a cloud or on-prem, and try to figure out what the best solution is on those. But it's all people right now. Technology is great, but it's the people. at this point, and hopefully people who like each other. Team formed, team synergy is huge, and it's huge for my team. We like to help each other. If you're going to work long hours because of anything, you better like the people you're with, or else you don't want to do that extra work. And that is just something that happens with teams and synergy.
So if I was to paraphrase, that was all great. But if I was to paraphrase, you're saying, A, don't give up because you think it's too hard. Two, surround yourself people with eager minds that want to team with you, that want to help you succeed. And three, read your book, right?
Yeah, I'm not a great salesperson, right? I'm not, but it's we've had some great feedback. Like I said, the books can flop, right? You could always put out a book and 5 people buy it. We've been incredibly fortunate with the adoption, and in no small part, it's because I'm at HSBC, because my vendors, after 20 years, you get to know so many different people, that word of mouth happened just because of knowing places. Same with Mark. It's Tremolo Security. He can get the word out. And then we started doing videos for the books. So we decided in the second edition, we'd start doing videos of all the exercises. So if you were reading it and you ran into a problem, what do you do with most books? You might post in the issues, you might post in the Slack forum.
Right.
Instead, we decided to actually, Mark, I should give all the credit to my co-author. He's taken all that work so far. Everything step by step. So it's about an hour for each chapter, and he makes it a fun time as much as you can with a talking head. If you're sitting there watching a video, an hour is a long time for an adult, right? Our attention span's 5 minutes. So people go off in the weeds. Mark tries to make it pretty interesting.
Cool.
And we want to keep doing that. We take feedback from people all the time. If anybody's interested and they're buying the book, please reach out to us. It's great. It just keeps adding to that time I have to keep doing, but it's well worth it. It's well worth it.
Oh, that's great. And speaking of the attention span, we're running to the end of our session here. This has been great. Last question for you. I want to ask you which Canadian team is going to win the Stanley Cup, but I'll just open it up in case you don't want to cheer for you don't find yourself putting on that Toronto hat being in Buffalo.
I was just going to say that actually, though. I mean, come on, Matthews is just scary. I mean, although I have to admit, though, let's say it's Toronto, and Matthews does it. At least he's a USA player, though. So he's an American player, so that's always a tough one. It's not like you have Sidney Crosby helping you, where you could have Canada and Canada.
Exactly right.
Toronto's got a decent chance. We know their gameplay can be a little bit hit or miss, but that's hockey, right? I don't care what team it is. But I've got to put in my team, right? I'm a Penguins fan, always have been. Although they have not been closing out the season well. That is not the way to end the season when you just are losing by a goal against competitors. So I think it's gonna be great. I think it's gonna be a great playoffs now with the arenas back to having people. You can just see the energy is different from when they used to have nothing. The games are exciting again. So it's great to have some normalcy. I'll say from this. I'm looking forward. Playoff hockey. There's nothing better to watch than playoff hockey.
Well, thank you, Scott. This has been a great half hour. I really appreciate your time. This is awesome. Let's keep up the conversation, and I'm going to finish reading your book hopefully this next weekend. I've been plowing through it, so I'm learning a lot.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care of yourself. Thanks
You
so
too,
much.
Joe. Thanks.